Do you believe your dignity lies in the hands of others? The respect you so desperately seek isn't found in applause or other people's validation. It's a fortress you build from the inside out. If you ignore this truth, you could spend your entire life building a castle in the sand, only to be torn down by the first gust of wind. How many times have you sacrificed your peace to please someone? At work, accepting what overwhelms you. At home, saying yes when your soul screams no. This relentless pursuit of likes and approval makes you give up who you are. But a man who knows himself and acts virtuously does not fear the judgment of others. His firmness, his consistency, that is the foundation of true respect. And the price of not applying this wisdom is the loss of your own identity. You become an echo of the voices of strangers. But the answer to this prison isn't what you expect. If this reflection is already opening your eyes, sign up now and walk with me on this path of strength and serenity. Then let's move on to what really matters. Stop for a moment and look around you. How many people shape their decisions, words, and even the way they dress to please others? It's a silent but constant spectacle. At work, they accept invitations they don't want, participate in conversations they despise, and smile at those they don't trust. All this for a fragile currency, momentary approval. You've done it too, and the moment you give in, you feel something inside you lose its power. On social media, the scene becomes even clearer. I see men and women transforming their lives into carefully edited showcases, not to express who they truly are, but to receive a digital seal of approval, a like, a comment, a number that rises on the screen, and the heart races, as if there were the measure of the value of a life. But just as it rises, it falls. And in the silence of the night, what remains is the echo of insecurity. Perhaps your reflection in the mirror has asked you, who are you truly without the applause of others? This question hurts because it reveals the wound you deny. Acknowledging that your choices are trapped in the web of other people's opinions is like admitting to dependence. And dependence is always a prison, even if its bars are invisible. In the family environment, this manifests itself differently. Perhaps you keep the truth to yourself for fear of hurting someone, or you accept unfair behavior to maintain the appearance of peace. But apparent peace is merely forced silence. It's a calm river on the surface, while the currents at the bottom drag you away from yourself. At work, the quest for respect is confused with the need for acceptance. You stay overtime, taking on responsibilities that aren't yours, just to be seen as dedicated. But in doing so, you give your time, your energy, and your mental health to an altar that never satisfies. And in the end, you discover that other people's gratitude is as fickle as the direction of the wind. There's also silent contempt, the kind expressed not in words but in looks. Perhaps you've felt it. Someone listens to you with a half smile, as if your ideas are worthless. And in that moment, you feel the urge to explain yourself, to prove your worth. But the very act of trying to convince betrays the wound. Let's face it, the need for respect is often a cover for the fear of rejection. The fear of not being seen, not being remembered, not being important. It's this fear that pushes you to go with the flow, even when your internal compass points in another direction. And as you give in, you move further away from who you truly are. Recognizing this wound isn't a sign of weakness. It's the first step toward healing it. It's about accepting that much of your suffering doesn't come from what people say or do to you, but from the space you give it within yourself. As long as you believe that the respect of others defines your worth, you'll live like a castaway, always adrift from the opinions of others. The pain of not being respected has a bitter taste that's not easily forgotten. It's like an open wound that, no matter how hard you try to ignore it, burns every time someone treats you with indifference or belittles you in front of others. Deep down, you know you shouldn't depend on external validation, but there's something in human nature that seeks recognition. It's as if every approving glance is confirmation that you're on the right path. However, the danger lies precisely there. When your moral compass is guided by the gaze of others, you stop following your own path and become hostage to other people's expectations. And, little by little, your essence is diluted until you can no longer distinguish who you are from the persona you created to please. This quest for respect can also lead you to silence your truth. Perhaps you've experienced that moment when, during a meeting, someone presents a clearly flawed idea, and you know you could contribute a better perspective, but imagining the possibility of being ridiculed or generating conflict, you decide to remain silent. This omission, even momentary, leaves an internal mark. You feel the frustration of having remained silent, and at the same time, the feeling that you gave in to cowardice. It's at that moment that the wound deepens, because the respect you seek from others comes at the cost of the respect you owe yourself. In friendships, the pattern repeats itself in a more subtle way. Perhaps you have a friend who constantly makes jokes at your expense, disguising them as jokes. On the outside, you laugh to keep the mood light, but inside, you feel discomfort building. Every time this happens, you confirm, even if unintentionally, that this kind of treatment is acceptable. And so, the image others have of you is shaped not by who you say you are, but by what you allow them to do to you. The problem is that, by remaining silent, you educate people to treat you less than you deserve. In family life, the trap is even more dangerous, as affection mixes with obligation. Perhaps you accept unfair criticism from a relative because you believe that family is just like that, or that confrontation would only lead to more problems. But respect doesn't recognize blood ties as an excuse for abuse. If you allow yourself to be treated with disdain within your own home, you'll be teaching yourself that you're not worthy of firmness. And when you believe this, yourself, the battle is already half lost. Many also confuse respect with fear. Some pride themselves on imposing their presence through intimidation, a raised voice, or physical force. But this respect is merely disguised fear. It lasts until the person finds the courage to confront or walk away. True respect is silent, born of consistency, and grows through constancy. It doesn't require grandiose displays or veiled threats. It stands on its own because it is rooted in integrity. When you live trapped in the desire for respect, every criticism becomes a personal attack and every compliment a vital nourishment. It's like being chained to an emotional pendulum. One day you're soaring because someone recognized you. The next, you're on the floor because someone ignored you. This oscillation not only robs you of peace, but leaves you vulnerable to manipulation. Those who know you desperately need respect can use it as a bargaining chip, controlling your actions with measured doses of approval. There are also those moments when you realize you did something just to impress. Maybe you accepted an invitation, bought something expensive, or attended an event that had nothing to do with you, just to be seen as interesting or successful. In the moment of action, there may have been a fleeting satisfaction, but then comes the feeling of emptiness. It's like biting into a fruit that looks beautiful on the outside and discovering that it's rotten on the inside. The respect that comes from this kind of effort is always fragile because it's built not on who you are, but on the image you portray. Acknowledging the wound means facing the discomfort of knowing that you were often the architect of your own prison. It's admitting that you've opened the doors to the influence of other people's opinions, and worse, that you've grown accustomed to living this way. But it also means realizing that if this dependence was learned, it can be unlearned. It's not a quick or painless process, but it's the only one that leads to the kind of respect that can't be taken away from you. the kind that comes from living according to your own principles, without needing an audience to validate your every move. Often, the quest for respect disguises itself as ambition. You tell yourself you want to advance your career, be recognized for your competence, and achieve a position of influence. And there's nothing wrong with that, until you realize your efforts are no longer driven by the desire to serve with excellence, but by the need to be seen. The difference is subtle but crucial. When you work to fulfill your purpose, respect can be a consequence. When you work solely to be respected, it becomes an obsession. And obsession invariably exhausts you because it depends on factors that are never fully under your control. There's also the danger of molding your personality to the environment, like an actor who changes costumes for every scene. At work, you're a serious and reserved person. Among friends, you exaggerate stories to appear more interesting. With family, you adopt a docile demeanor to avoid friction. The ability to adapt is useful, but when you lose coherence between these roles, you begin to live like a chameleon who no longer remembers his own color, and a man who forgets who he is cannot inspire true respect. He merely plays the role of someone respectable. The weight of this inconsistency becomes more evident when you find yourself alone. It's in the silence of the early morning, when there are no eyes to judge you, that the masks fall. Perhaps you've already felt this uneasiness, the feeling that no matter how much everyone applauds you, you don't recognize yourself in the character you play. It's at this moment that the respect you receive from others loses its value, because you realize it's not meant for you, but for the image you've created. Another subtle trap is the desire to correct every misperception someone might have about you. You hear unfair criticism and immediately feel the need to explain, justify, and clean up your image. But often, the more you try to prove who you are, the more you confirm in the eyes of others that you have something to prove. The Stoic knows that truth stands on its own. It doesn't need to be defended with every breath of wind. The energy you spend trying to control other people's opinions is energy you lack to live with integrity. Sometimes, disrespect comes from the people you least expect, those who claim to care about you. A friend who constantly interrupts you, a partner who disregards your opinions, a colleague who appropriates your ideas, and, for fear of ruining the relationship, you swallow your indignation. But every time you do, you send the other person a silent message. It's okay to treat me this way. And with each repetition, this message grows stronger until it becomes an unspoken rule in the relationship. This pattern can also stem from childhood, when you learned that being loved meant pleasing. Perhaps you grew up avoiding conflict to avoid losing affection, and now, as an adult, you repeat this behavior to maintain respect. But what you call respect may actually be a fear of losing the little acceptance you believe you have. Until you question this root, you will continue to trade your dignity for a kind of peace that only exists on the surface. Superficial respect is like a shadow at dusk. It lingers and seems imposing for a moment, but disappears as soon as the light changes. Basing your identity on it is like building a house on shaky ground. A change in circumstances is all it takes for the entire structure to crumble. This fragility is what keeps many in a constant state of anxiety, always looking over their shoulder to see if they are still respected by the circle they chose to please. Acknowledging the wound also means accepting that genuine respect cannot be begged or bought. It is earned indirectly as a byproduct of living consistently. But as long as your energy is focused on seeking external signs of validation, there will be no room left to develop the virtue that inevitably attracts respect. This is the point where you must decide whether you will remain hostage to other people's perceptions or whether you will build something no one can take away from you: self-respect. True respect begins to fade the moment you start measuring your worth by other people's standards. It's like carrying a broken mirror, trying to see your image in it, but each fragment distorts who you are. Today, someone praises you and fills you with confidence. Tomorrow, one criticism is enough to dismantle you. This back and forth not only wears down your mind, but also makes you unstable in the eyes of those observing you. And instability doesn't inspire respect, it inspires distrust. People who waver at the whim of other people's approval are rarely seen as steadfast or trustworthy. Many believe that earning respect depends on constantly proving their worth. Therefore, they accept challenges they don't want, participate in conversations they're not interested in, and strive to always appear more than they really are. But overexerting themselves to impress actually reveals insecurity. It's like an actor who overdoes their performance because they fear they won't be convincing. Those who truly have value don't need to prove anything every moment. Their daily actions are enough to prove it. The wound of feeling disrespected also reveals itself in the small details of your day. It's the feeling of being interrupted while speaking, of having your ideas ignored until someone else repeats them, of noticing exchanged glances that diminish you. These small attacks, accumulated over time, silently erode your confidence, and before you know it, you're already talking less, acting less, taking up less space, as if that way you can avoid further blows. But by diminishing yourself to avoid pain, you end up confirming the distorted view others have of you. There are still those who try to buy respect with favors. They do more than necessary, offer help even when they can't, always putting others' interests above their own. And for a while, it seems to work. Everyone likes the helpful person, but the first time you refuse a request, the spell is broken. You discover it wasn't respect you were receiving, but convenience. And convenience disappears when you stop serving others' interests. Another common manifestation of this wound is the fear of speaking out. You may have firm convictions, but if you remain silent to avoid displeasing others, you're handing over control of your voice to external judgment. It's as if you're letting others write your own speech. And when someone realizes you don't stand up for what you believe, they begin to see you as malleable, easily influenced. This is the opposite of respect. It's an invitation to manipulation. You can't ignore the influence of your environment. Surrounding yourself with people who don't respect your own principles makes it harder for you to respect your own. Constant contact with mediocrity normalizes behaviors that previously bothered you. Over time, you stop noticing that you're giving up small pieces of integrity to fit in, but each concession is one less brick in the structure that supports your character. And then there's the exaggerated self-demand, which leads you to believe you need to be impeccable to deserve respect. In this effort, you become intolerant of your own mistakes, living under an internal regime of relentless criticism. This creates constant tension, as any failure, no matter how small, seems to confirm the narrative that you're unworthy. But true respect isn't born from perfection, but from the courage to act correctly even when it's difficult, even when you make a mistake and get up to try again. Finally, acknowledging the wound means accepting that, as long as your peace depends on the gaze of others, you will always be at the mercy of chance. Today they respect you, tomorrow they despise you, and your emotional stability fluctuates accordingly. Freedom begins when you understand that external respect is only a temporary reflection of the internal, and if the internal is intact, even if the world silences its applause, you remain standing with the same dignity. Stoicism teaches that much of our pain stems from a fundamental confusion. We confuse what is within our control with what is beyond it. Respect from others, however desirable it may seem, resides in the realm of external things. No matter how hard you try, you don't have absolute power over other people's perceptions, beliefs, or judgments. However, by acting as if you do, you enter an unwinnable struggle. It's like trying to control the wind with your hands. Exhausting, futile, and frustrating. Only when you accept that you don't control the way others look at you do you free yourself to focus on What truly depends on you, your character, your choices, your conduct. The root of this need for respect often lies in the ego. The ego craves to be seen, recognized, celebrated. It feeds on applause and withers in indifference. But the problem with the ego is that it is insatiable. The more it receives, the more it demands. And this constant hunger leaves you vulnerable because all it takes is for someone to take away the plate of approval for you to feel ruined. The Stoic, on the other hand, understands that dignity needs no audience. A man's worth does not increase when he is applauded, nor does it diminish when he is ignored. Another factor that fuels the wound is expectation. When you help someone, you expect gratitude. When you work hard, you expect recognition. When you act justly, you expect respect. But these expectations, however human, trap you, because when they're not met, they turn into frustration and resentment. Marcus Aurelius warned, "If you do good, ask for nothing. More than that, you have done it." The same goes for respect. Your virtue is your reward, and nothing beyond that is guaranteed. The desire for approval is also reinforced by constant comparisons. You look at others, co-workers, friends, strangers on social media, and measure your worth by how they appear to be treated. If someone else receives more attention or praise, your instinct is to think you're doing something wrong. This comparison is like a slow-release poison. It erodes your self-confidence until everything you do is filtered by, "Will they like me?" And at that point, you no longer live to be who you are, but to fulfill invisible expectations. There's also the influence of fear. The fear of rejection is so powerful that it often leads us to agree with ideas we don't believe in, to stay in places we don't want to be, or to tolerate behaviors that hurt us. This fear is a prison disguised as protection. It convinces you that avoiding confrontation preserves your peace, when in reality, it's only ensuring that your dignity is silently eroded. The Stoic understands that true peace comes not from the absence of conflict, but from the clarity that even in the face of it, you have remained true to yourself. Another root of this relentless search is the memory of old wounds. Many carry childhood or youth experiences in which they were humiliated, ignored, or treated as invisible. These emotional scars shape the adult, who begins to seek reparations for the past in the present. But in doing so, you surrender your present to ghosts that no longer exist. The Stoic does not deny the past, but neither does he let it dictate the rules of the present. He acknowledges the wounds, but does not allow them to determine his value today. The habit of reacting immediately to criticism is also linked to the root of the problem. When you rush to respond or justify every negative comment, you reveal that your center of balance is outside of yourself. This puts you in a position of constant defensiveness, where any misplaced word can shake your posture. It's like living in a house without walls. Any wind enters and changes the temperature. The Stoic, on the contrary, builds internal walls that don't impede dialogue, but filter what deserves to be taken seriously or not. Finally, there's the mistaken belief that respect is something to be demanded, when in fact it's earned indirectly. The more you strive to obtain it directly, by asking, imposing, or demanding, the more it recedes. It's like trying to hold water with your open hands. The more force you apply, the more it slips through your fingers. True respect arises when you live by your principles, not to be seen, but because it's the only dignified way to live. And ironically, this is what causes others, without you even realizing it, to begin respecting you. Another element that keeps this wound alive is the illusion that everyone thinks of you more than they actually do. You spend hours replaying a situation where someone looked at you strangely, imagining it was a judgment of you. You relive conversations, analyzing every word spoken, trying to guess what the other person was thinking. But in reality, most people are more concerned with themselves than with your life. This habit of interpreting imaginary signals traps you in a cycle of anxiety and insecurity, where others' perceptions become more important than your own. There's also the weight of the culture you grew up in. Some societies place extreme value on appearance, status, and public opinion. From an early age, we learn that image is worth almost as much as, or even more than, content. Thus, we grow up believing we need to be seen a certain way to be respected. The Stoic breaks with this mindset by understanding that image can be manipulated, but character cannot. And it is in character, not in facade, that true respect finds deep roots. The confusion between respect and popularity is another point that needs to be addressed. Popularity is noisy, fleeting, and often superficial. One can be popular for reasons that have nothing to do with virtue or integrity. True respect, however, is quiet, lasting, and sustained by consistent actions. When you confuse the two, you run the risk of seeking to be liked by everyone, sacrificing values in the process. A man who tries to please everyone ends up being respected by no one, as he no longer has a clear position. Many people fall into the trap of surrounding themselves only with those who praise them, avoiding any dissenting voice. This creates a comfortable but deceptive bubble, as respect isn't tested on smooth terrain, but rather in the moments when someone disagrees with you and still maintains consideration. The Stoic knows that constructive criticism isn't a sign of disrespect, but an opportunity for growth. The weakness lies in interpreting any disagreement as a personal attack, because it reveals that the basis of your worth still lies outside of you. Another deep-rooted issue is wounded pride. When you feel disrespected, your immediate reaction may be to retaliate, raise your voice, and show strength. But deep down, this impulse reflects the fear of appearing weak. Stoic philosophy reminds us that self-control is strength, and that reacting impulsively is often a sign of emotional slavery. When you are your own master, you don't need to prove anything. Your serenity is testimony enough. The influence of social media in intensifying this quest for respect cannot be ignored. Today, validation is measured in likes, comments, and shares. A photo that doesn't receive enough attention can generate disproportionate frustration. This dynamic conditions the brain to constantly seek external signs of approval, weakening the ability to find satisfaction in the very act of living with integrity. The Stoic understands that digital metrics say nothing about a person's true worth. There's also the difficulty in accepting that not everyone will respect you, no matter how upright you are. There will always be those who, out of envy, prejudice, or simple ignorance, will choose to diminish you. Trying to change this is a waste of precious energy. Wisdom lies in accepting that others' disrespect, when unfounded, is a reflection of them, not of you. When you understand this, your need to correct every injustice weakens and your peace grows. Ultimately, understanding the root of this problem means realizing that deep down, it's not the respect of others you seek, but the sense of security you believe it will bring. However, this security is illusory as long as it depends on external factors. The only respect that can truly offer you stability is the one you build internally, living according to values you yourself recognize as non-negotiable. When this foundation is solid, everything else becomes secondary. Often, the thirst for respect stems from a misunderstanding of the very concept of value. You come to believe that your worth is something others grant you, like an honorary title that can be given or taken away. This puts you in a position of constant vigilance, always trying to maintain the respect you've earned. But for the Stoic, value isn't granted. It's inherent. It comes from virtuous conduct, independent of witnesses or applause. When you understand this deeply, you realize that no one can truly take from you what was never theirs to give. Another hidden root is the need to control how you're perceived. You can spend hours calculating words, rehearsing responses, adjusting your behavior to align with what you think others expect. This isn't authenticity. It's theater, and living on stage requires enormous mental energy, as any slip-up can reveal who you really are, or rather, can shatter the illusion you've created. The Stoic understands that it's impossible to control other people's perceptions, and that this effort, besides being futile, is exhausting. There's also the false belief that respect means being admired by everyone. This universal quest is fertile ground for frustration. No matter how upright you are, there will always be someone who misinterprets you, distorts your actions, or simply dislikes you for reasons that have nothing to do with you. Expecting absolute respect is like waiting for a sea without waves. No matter how long you wait, it will never come. Serenity comes from accepting that true respect is selective. It flourishes in minds capable of recognizing it, and those are not all. The fear of losing earned respect also shapes self-destructive behaviors. When you believe your image is more important than your truth, you end up choosing decisions that are safer from a social perspective, but that betray your principles. Perhaps you avoid an unpopular position even though you know it's the right one. Or you remain silent in the face of injustice to avoid being seen as problematic. These moments erode integrity and over time weaken the foundation of any real respect. Personal insecurity fuels this quest. People who lack clarity about their own values tend to rely on the approval of others to define who they are. Without a firm core, you become like a drifting boat, changing direction with the winds of opinion. The Stoic, on the other hand, anchors their identity in virtue, which doesn't change with the social climate. This stability is what conveys quiet authority and inspires lasting confidence. The habit of over-justifying yourself also reveals a dependence on external validation. Explaining yourself once can be a gesture of clarity. Insisting on explaining yourself repeatedly is a sign of fear. It's as if you need to convince others to respect you, as if the value of your actions is only real when recognized by someone. For the Stoic, a life lived according to reason and virtue is self-sufficient. It sustains itself even in the face of misunderstanding and slander. Another aspect is the confusion between respect and obedience. There are leaders who believe they are respected only because they are obeyed, when in reality they are feared. Fear can produce compliance, but never genuine loyalty. True respect is not forced. It is freely given by those who recognize firmness and justice in your actions. And this can only be earned when you act consistently, not to please, but to be fair. Ultimately, understanding the root of the quest for respect is recognizing that it's linked to a deep desire for emotional security. You believe that if you're respected, you'll be protected from criticism, humiliation, and rejection. But the world offers no such guarantees. True security lies in knowing that, regardless of what anyone says or does, you remain true to your principles. This is the kind of strength no one can take away, and it makes the need to prove your worth at every turn irrelevant. One of the most silent causes of the obsession with respect is the difficulty in dealing with the silence of others. When someone doesn't respond to a message, doesn't comment on your work, or simply doesn't acknowledge your presence, you interpret it as a sign of devaluation. This immediate interpretation stems from insecurity, not reality. Silence isn't always disrespectful. Often it's simply distraction, lack of time, or different priorities. The problem is that by interpreting silence as an affront, you put yourself in a constant state of defense, wasting energy on battles that only exist in your mind. Another point is that the desire for respect is often reinforced by momentary rewards. When you act to please and receive approval, your brain associates that action with success. Thus, without realizing it, you condition your behavior to seek applause, like an actor who only feels worthwhile when in the spotlight. This dependence becomes an emotional addiction. Every time the applause is lacking, you feel withdrawal. The Stoic, however, doesn't perform for the audience. He performs for his own conscience, which is the only judge that accompanies him every day. There's also a tendency to measure your worth by the treatment you receive, when, in fact, how others treat you reflects much more about them than it does about you. If someone treats you rudely, it may say something about their character, their current state of life, their own struggles, and little or nothing about your worth. Understanding this is liberating because it stops you from playing the game of trying to prove you deserve respect. You're already worthy of it simply by acting with integrity, and that's not up for debate. The root of the wound also deepens when you allow repeated disrespect to become normalized. Each time you let an offensive behavior slide without setting boundaries, you send a silent message that it is acceptable. And over time, this permissiveness erodes your own sense of worth. It's as if you're telling yourself, "I don't deserve better than this." The Stoic recognizes that setting boundaries isn't aggression, it's protecting what they know they're worth. The desire for respect, when misunderstood, can also lead you to imitate behaviors that aren't your own. You see someone admired for their firmness and try to replicate their posture, their way of speaking, their decisions. But true respect isn't born from copying, it's born from authenticity. When you imitate, you run the risk of appearing artificial, and this distances more than it brings. The Stoic knows that strength lies in living in alignment with what is true for oneself, even if it means standing out from the crowd. An important psychological factor is that often the quest for respect is actually an escape from the fear of being insignificant. You want to leave a mark. You want to be remembered. You want to be spoken of with admiration. But the fear of insignificance is illusory because our lives on a cosmic scale are brief and small. The Stoic accepts this reality and, instead of trying to fight it by seeking eternal respect, dedicates himself to living each day with virtue. And that, in itself, is enough. The influence of the past cannot be ignored either. If you grew up in an environment where your worth was constantly questioned or compared, it's natural that, as an adult, you'll relentlessly seek signs that you're enough. But the problem is that when this search is driven by old wounds, it never seems to be satisfied. The Stoic acknowledges the pain of the past, but doesn't allow it to dictate their present. They choose to rebuild their self-image based on their actions today, not the scars of yesterday. Ultimately, understanding the root of the need for respect means understanding that it can only be dissolved when you accept that the most important respect is the one you feel for yourself. When your life is lived according to solid principles, when you can face your own reflection without shame, any external respect becomes a bonus. Pleasant, but not necessary. It is at this point that the wound begins to heal, because you are no longer a slave to the gaze of others. If you truly want to free yourself from the prison of external validation, you must begin with the most fundamental exercise of Stoicism, clearly separating what is within your control from what is not. The respect of others is beyond your direct reach. You cannot control other people's thoughts, feelings, or judgments, but you can control your conduct, your words, your decisions, and the way you choose to react. Each day, remember this division. When you feel the temptation to act to impress, ask yourself if you are doing it because it is right or just to garner applause. This simple pause begins to shift your mindset. Another practical exercise is to cultivate calculated indifference. This doesn't mean ignoring everything or living in isolation, but learning to filter what deserves your emotional attention. Unfair criticism from someone who barely knows you can carry the same weight as advice from someone who loves and respects you. Imagine you have an internal scale. Every opinion that arrives needs to be judged by, does this person live my life? Do they know my values? Do they contribute to my growth? If the answer is no, then they don't deserve space in your mind. It's also essential to practice aligning your words and actions. A man who says something and follows through is rare and therefore naturally respected. Start with small commitments. If you say you'll call, call. If you promise to deliver something, deliver on time. If you take on a duty, fulfill it to the end. Consistency is a muscle that strengthens with repetition, and the more consistent you are, the more your self-respect grows, making you immune to the desperate need for external respect. Controlling anger is another central pillar. When faced with provocation, breathe before reacting. Count to 10 mentally, observe the impulse to respond, and let it pass. Responding calmly to an attack is a silent demonstration of power. People may not praise your calm in the moment, but they will remember it much more than if you had exploded. Anger may intimidate for a moment, but firm calm builds lasting authority. Learning to say no with dignity is equally transformative. Many lose self-respect because they accept everything, believing that this will win others' sympathy. But in practice, this communicates that your limits are fragile. The Stoic no is not harsh but firm. It doesn't require long justifications. It just needs to be said clearly and respectfully. And the more you practice this skill, the more you realize that the world doesn't fall apart when you put yourself first. Another practical habit is to reduce the need to over-explain yourself. When you make a decision aligned with your values, there's no need to convince everyone around you. Explain once, if necessary, and move on. This behavior demonstrates confidence and focus, and it saves emotional energy. It's a daily reminder that your life is guided by what's right, not what's popular. Practicing active listening is also a powerful way to earn respect without seeking it. The Stoic understands that listening attentively and responding thoughtfully creates deeper connections. By listening without interrupting, you demonstrate control, patience, and genuine interest. This builds bridges and, over time, creates natural, not imposed, respect. Finally, start recording your acts of integrity daily, no matter how small. Note moments when you chose honesty, even when it was difficult, when you remained calm in the face of a challenge, or when you respected your own limits. This record is like an inventory of your dignity, a concrete reminder that you already have within you the solid foundation to not depend on the gaze of others. When you revisit these notes, you will see that true respect was never external. It was always in the way you choose to live. Another Stoic practice that transforms relationships with respect is cultivating silent presence. Instead of speaking to be noticed, speak only when you have something relevant to add. Observe more, react less. People who rush to give their opinion on everything often sound insecure. Those who choose their words carefully convey a quiet strength. This doesn't mean omitting yourself, but rather avoiding wasting energy on pointless arguments or uneducated conversations. Respect often stems from the realization that your voice is rare and valuable. It's also helpful to establish a morning routine of mental preparation. Before embarking on your day, take a few minutes to reflect on what truly matters and the types of situations that might test you. Imagine that you will face criticism, delays, and provocations, and decide in advance how you will react. This anticipation is an invisible armor. When the moment arrives, you are ready. Marcus Aurelius did this when writing his Meditations, reminding himself daily that he would encounter ungrateful and unjust people, and that he should still act with righteousness. A practical exercise is to shift your focus. Instead of thinking, how can I make others respect me? Think, how can I act to respect myself? This simple shift in question changes the energy of your actions. When the goal is to respect your own principles, external opinions lose priority. You begin to act with more freedom because the criteria for approval are within, not outside. Another essential habit is the nightly review. At the end of the day, ask yourself, in what moments did I maintain my integrity today, and in what moments did I sacrifice it for approval? This honest assessment isn't meant to blame yourself, but to adjust your course. Stoic progress doesn't happen by chance, but through constant observation and correction. Each night, you clear the ground for better attitudes the next day. Practicing moderation also strengthens self-respect. Avoid exaggeration, whether in speech, action, or reaction. Balanced people exude confidence. This doesn't mean being cold or distant, but rather avoiding letting momentary emotions dictate your actions. When you realize you're about to overreact, breathe and regain control. This pause in itself is a sign of self-control, and self-control is one of the most admired virtues, even by those who don't know how to name it. A powerful method is to take responsibility without expecting credit. If something needs to be done and you can do it, do it. There's no need to advertise or demand recognition. Over time, people recognize who is trustworthy, even if they don't say anything. And this quiet reliability builds a solid reputation that survives fads and passing opinions. The respect earned this way is discreet but lasting. It's also worth practicing strategic detachment. Learn to let some attacks or slights go unanswered. Not every battle deserves your energy. Sometimes the greatest display of strength is disregard for petty conflict. This stance isn't weakness, it's intelligence. Those who rush to respond to everything end up wearing themselves out and putting themselves on the same level as the provocateur. The Stoic chooses their battles wisely. Finally, reinforce your long-term vision daily. Ask yourself, will this situation that bothers me now matter in a year, 10 years? Often, recognizing the insignificance of an episode helps you react calmly. True respect is the fruit of years of consistency, not immediate victories in debates or arguments. By maintaining a broad perspective, you preserve your energy for what truly builds your legacy. Another powerful tool is the exercise of reverse perspective. Whenever you feel someone has disrespected you, try to imagine the situation from their perspective. Ask yourself, what could be going on in their life that made them act like this? Often, rude behavior reflects someone else's frustrations, fears, or ignorance, not a flaw of your own. This emotional distance prevents impulsive reactions from taking over and preserves your balance. Responding with understanding rather than anger is a skill that immediately elevates your standing in the eyes of those observing. Cultivating clarity of purpose is also essential. When you know exactly what you want from life, it becomes easier to ignore comments or attitudes that don't contribute to your journey. Those who lack a defined purpose are distracted by any criticism or praise, like a leaf in the wind. But those who live guided by a greater purpose stay the course, even amidst the noise of opinions. And it's precisely this consistency that in the long run makes others respect your path. Practicing silent self-affirmation also strengthens self-respect. In moments of doubt, it involves mentally recalling situations in which you acted with courage, integrity, or discipline. These memories act as emotional anchors that prevent you from giving in to the urge to please. When you remember that you were able to keep your word and your values in difficult situations, it becomes easier to repeat that pattern today. Another practical exercise is to set minimum standards for yourself and stick to them regardless of who's watching. This could mean waking up on time, keeping your workspace organized, or delivering tasks before the deadline. These habits, though simple, build a sense of discipline that doesn't depend on external recognition. You know you're accomplishing what you set out to do, and this alone places you at an internal level of respect that no outside comment can shake. It's also important to recognize internal victories. Celebrating only visible achievements limits your growth. Learn to appreciate the moments when you controlled an impulse, were patient in the face of provocation, or chose honesty even at immediate cost. These small victories strengthen your self-esteem and make external respect irrelevant. Training in constancy is another pillar of Stoic healing. Respect is built through daily repetition, not through isolated acts of greatness. Many people make a momentary impression, but few maintain firm conduct over the years. If you want to be truly respected, commit to what is right every day, not just when it's convenient. Managing your digital presence is also crucial. In today's world, you're watched both physically and online. Impulsive posts, aggressive responses, or excessive exposure can undermine the image of firmness and self-control you're building. Use social media as a conscious extension of your posture, remembering that consistency is what sustains credibility. Finally, integrate all these practices into a single principle. Live in alignment with your values, without depending on the audience. When your life becomes coherent from dawn to dusk, when your private gestures are as integral as your public actions, respect ceases to be something to pursue and becomes an inevitable reflex. From that point on, any external recognition will be merely an echo of something that has already blossomed within you. True change begins when you realize you no longer need to watch other people's gaze to feel like you're on the right path. You move more lightly because your decisions are no longer dictated by the fear of displeasing them. You begin to notice that other people's silence no longer bothers you as much, and that unfair criticism passes through you like wind through solid stone. This tranquility isn't cold indifference, but the serenity of someone who knows they're living in alignment with their own moral code. And, curiously, it's at this moment that you realize something almost paradoxical. When you stop seeking respect, it begins to come naturally. Relationships change too. People who once tested your limits now treat you more carefully, not because you threatened them, but because your stance made clear what you accept and what you don't. There's a kind of quiet firmness that needs no explanation, and it's born of consistency. You no longer need long speeches to justify your choices. Your habits speak for you. And this kind of communication, the communication of coherence, is impossible to fake. At work, you realize that the energy previously spent on impressing is now used to deliver real results. You no longer need to accept every request to be seen as dedicated. You choose the tasks that truly make sense and execute them with excellence. The consequence is that you become more productive, less anxious, and ironically more respected. The respect that arises from delivering value is more solid than that which depends on appearances. The transformation also reveals itself in how you handle conflict. Before, you might have reacted in kind, fueling pointless arguments to prove you were right. Now, you choose your battles carefully, responding calmly or sometimes not responding at all. This saving of mental energy not only preserves your peace, but also increases others' perception of your maturity. On a personal level, your self-esteem grows silently. You no longer need applause to feel proud of yourself. Small daily gestures, like keeping a promise to yourself or acting honestly in easily manipulated situations, become genuine sources of satisfaction. This inner respect is like a reservoir that sustains you even when the world around you seems indifferent. The most impressive thing is that change doesn't depend on external circumstances. You can be anywhere with anyone and still maintain the same posture. This makes you resilient because your balance isn't tied to changing variables. It's like having an internal anchor that keeps you steady even when the waves are strong. And this stability is magnetic. People trust those who remain constant under pressure. Another effect is true freedom of expression. Since you no longer depend on others' acceptance, you can speak and act more authentically. This doesn't mean being offensive or careless, but having the courage to express opinions and boundaries without fear of rejection. This authenticity attracts those who also value truth and drives away those who only respect masks. And this is a powerful natural screening tool for your relationships. Finally, you realize that true respect isn't a trophy someone hands you, but a continuous state of coherence with your principles. There's no finish line, just the daily commitment to being who you say you are. And by living this way, you inspire, teach, and above all, keep your dignity intact, which is in the end, the only form of respect that truly matters. When you reach this point, you discover that the quest for respect transforms into something much deeper, a quest for virtue. You stop asking, "What will they think of me?" and start asking, "What is the right thing to do now?" This shift in question changes the entire way you move in the world. Every action becomes guided by principles, not convenience. And in the end, you realize that this is precisely what inspires true respect, the kind that doesn't need to be asked for because it is naturally granted to those who live righteously. This new attitude also brings peace to your mind. You no longer waste hours ruminating on criticism or other people's silence. Time previously spent worrying becomes space for reflection, study, and growth. You gain clarity about your priorities and realize that much of what previously kept you awake was just noise. This saving of emotional energy converts into real presence. You live more in the moment because you're no longer constantly calculating your image. The transformation, however, doesn't mean everyone will respect you. There will always be those who try to test your limits or who interpret your firmness as arrogance. The difference is that now, this no longer shakes you. You understand that the other person's perspective is their responsibility, not yours. And by remaining calm, even in these situations, you become a living example of self-control, something rare and admired, even if it's not openly stated. Then the cycle closes. By stopping seeking respect, you find something much greater: freedom. Freedom to live according to your values, to speak honestly, to act firmly, to remain silent when necessary. And this freedom is the soil where genuine respect flourishes. Not the fragile respect that depends on momentary approval, but the solid respect that survives time and the absence of an audience. That's when you realize the whole journey was worth it, because, in the end, you not only earned the respect of others, you earned once and for all respect for yourself. Perhaps now you realize that the respect that truly matters isn't asked for, negotiated, or bought. It's built day after day in the silence of your choices and the firmness of your principles. When this truth becomes clear, the weight of other people's opinions begins to fade, and you begin to walk with more ease. Tell me in the comments if you've ever had to choose between pleasing yourself and being true to yourself. I want to hear your story. Maybe it's the light someone else needs right now. If this reflection resonated with you, share it with someone who still lives trapped in the relentless pursuit of approval. It might be the push they need to reclaim their self-worth. And if you want to continue this journey of strength and serenity with me, sign up and let's walk side by side. Because in the end, respecting yourself is the most liberating decision there is. And that choice is in your hands today.